All right, rock and roll.
We're back! Hi, I'm Moraig Kisler. I'm a convener and president of Sisters in Crime. So welcome everyone. We're really delighted that you're here tonight. Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay. So tonight's topic is Shafted, Women in Peril, and we're just thrilled that after 2.5 years we're back here. So please welcome our panel that we have here, Kimberley, Starr, Margaret, Hickey, and long-time friend and Vikki Petraitis. I'm talking tonight about how women are abandoned in mine shafts in rural Victoria and how they also get shafted in other ways. All right? Just at the outset, on behalf of Sisters in Crime, we respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future, and we acknowledge their and uphold their continuing relationships to the land and sea here. Right, now if everyone wants to shift your tables round or your chairs around, if you can get it with you if you have it through, so that you get that quick neck. Okay. We'll be in conversation with our three panellists tonight for about an hour, and then we'll break for drinks, book buying and book signing, and the traditional Sisters in Crime raffle. So that's great. There's also up the back there a lot of books from the Sun Bookshop bookstall, and they'll be available for signing. Okay. All right, and also you get a 10% discount if you're a Sisters in Crime member, so that's great. And at the second half of the evening, after the raffle, we'll have questions to our panellists and a prize for the best question as judged by Louise Bassett, whose debut young adult crime novel, The Hidden Girl, is also being launched at Readings Kids on Thursday the 11th of August. Okay, and then just after about 10 o'clock when we're finished here, if you'd like to join for drinks downstairs and a bit of criminal conviviality, so you're quite happy to just join us. Okay, I'll just introduce you first to Kimberley. She's a teacher with 3 previous novels, The Kingdom Where Nobody Dies, The Book of Whispers and Torched, which was a fantastic book. And they've been won or shortlisted for multiple literary awards, including the Queensland Premier's Literary Award and the Text Publishing Young Adult Award. Her latest, A Map of Night, is just out with Pantera Press just this week, wasn't it? Yeah. And she's currently completing a PhD in creative writing. Everyone is. Okay, Margaret Hickey on the end there is an award-winning author and playwright from North East Victoria. Stonetown, which is the book we're discussing tonight, it's just out by Penguin Random House, is her follow-up of her best-selling crime debut, Cutter's End, which was released last year, and which has been shortlisted for the David Awards this year. She has a PhD in creative writing and is deeply interested in rural lives, communities. She spent the majority of her life living in regional towns, and her PhD, the focus was depictions of landscape in Australian literature. Okay. And Vikki Petraitis, is well known to many of you here tonight. She's a former convener of Sisters in Crime, or infamous, for her true crime books, including best-selling book The Frankston Murders, about the serial killer Paul Denyer, who's now a girl, I believe. He's back. Oh, has he? Okay. And her first book, The Phillip Island Murders, which featured in several TV shows and podcasts. In her true crime books, Vicki's had a wide range of things that she's covered, from police dogs to Lawyer X to the Russell Street bombing and several books on sex crimes. Her 2 podcast series with Case Files Present has been downloaded over 3 million times. PhD novel. The Unbelieved, which is what we're discussing tonight, won the inaugural Allen and Unwin Crime Fiction Award, and it'll be officially launched by fellow sister in crime writers Emily Webb on Tuesday the 2nd of August, at 6 p.m. at Readings Emporium, and everyone's invited, so you're all welcome. Okay. Right, now I think to start off I'd really like the authors just to give me their little elevator pitches, what your book's about.
Do I go first?
You can go first.
Pressure.
Yeah.
It's so exciting to be here. I was so excited driving down from Beechworth, and when Carmel said that I'd been shortlisted for the Davitt Award, because that's how I find my crime authors. That's how I find my great read. That's how I get my books that I really love. So I'm so excited. Stone Town is about, it's a murder mystery, but it deals with the tensions between urban and rural life, which is something that I know quite a lot about, having lived in small towns for 40 of my 50 years. And Stone Town, it's about a murder. 3 teenagers find a body in the bush who happens to be a real estate agent at the same and at the same time, there's a crime of national significance, which is that a young policewoman has gone missing in the Stone Town bush. So all of that is in the backdrop of the landscape, and in this case with the barking owl, Linux conidens, which is in my area. The barking owl, which sounds like a screaming, wailing woman. I hope none of you ever hear it. I hope none of your bloodline ever hear it. It's really frightening.
It's on YouTube. I looked it up.
Oh, it's
Okay, Vikki.
I have not worked on an elevator pitch, so
Well, just tell us what the book's about.
my book is about, it's a fight back novel, and it really was a book that I've been working on for 4 years. It was the Trump, the Weinstein, the Me Too, the Brittany Higgins, and all of that swirling around in my head. And my PhD research then started to reveal that conviction rates for sexual assault are around 4%. 80% of victims don't report it. So of the 20% that do, only 1 out of 5 gets to court. So really it was about that the law is failing women in this area. But all the women that you know are tough. We degenerate single, she's just a single mother, and you're like, single mothers work harder than anybody. And we have this sort of social narrative. And I wanted to pose the question, when the law doesn't work for women, what's left? Because we ain't taking it lying down.
My novel is The Nap of Night, and I was just thinking, listening to those two descriptions, that given that we're here because our novels had so much in common, when we actually describe them ourselves, they really don't have very much in common at all. My novel is a psychological story. It's the story of a marriage that's breaking down, that has broken down. I think it's quite clear at the start. And my characters, like Margaret's, are in Gold Rush, Victoria, where there are ungazetted mine shafts, which is where I first got the idea. I used to live just outside of Melbourne, and there's an area there that is now entirely suburban, but it was Gold Rush territory, and people's yards have arsenic and all sorts of nasty chemicals in the soil from that day. And I was thinking landscape as well, because in my world the land has been treated badly, and the land is sort of biting back, I think, was what I had in my mind when I started writing it. But it's a woman who is an astronomer, and that's why I've got stars on my sleeves, because I write very serious fiction, and my surname is Starr, and I like to, when I do these things, I like to sort of be a bit silly to make up for the fact that my books are always very serious. So it's a psychological story. It's a psychological thriller about a woman whose life has led to her being in danger and she's fallen into a mine shaft. And she thinks that people will come and rescue her, which is, I think, what we would all hope. And for various reasons, they don't. So that was the original idea that I had when I started to write it.
Thank you. There's another book that just came out too that it's another one down in mine shaft, so if you'd like to take me to a couple of these places, there's a few people I'd like to get rid of. So I think it'd be really nice if you could each read just a passage from your book or just a little bit from your book.
Okay. I need to borrow someone's glasses. Is this the book where I had the page? Is there one page in it? Is that the one? Thank you. Perfect. Glasses. Can I borrow your glasses, Moraig? Thank you. So my book is a tribute really to women I know very well, and my grandmothers and my mothers and my great aunts, and that's the CWA, and all through my life, yes, and all through my life and through my grandparents' life, my mum, they've been a steadfast. So this is just a bit about that. I think you can hear. The chatter in the room died off when he re-entered. Well, he said, I'll be off. Thanks for the tea and the Vikki. Sue, if I had a blue ribbon, I'd give you one. It was top-notch. Sue nodded. He turned to the rest of the women. Hope you all ladies win a prize for your jams or your scones or whatnot. Georgia made a scoffing sound, shaking her curls in derision. The rest of the women gazed at him. He smiled, uncertain. Once again, he was 10. It's not just about the prizes, Beth said from her corner. The fundraising's the thing. Yes? Mark looked at his watch. Too many things to do. Actual work. The new fire engine for the CWA, the renovations for the old folks' home, the playground of the school. The old lady listed them off on her thin fingers. You want a job done? He said, eyes on the door. Ask a busy per. And that woman who lives in the caravan, Jacqueline added, we're trying to find housing for her. Your mother, Beth said, was terrible at jam, but wonderful at organising rosters and prizes for the hospital stall. Baking scones, Pat looked at him squarely, is the least of what we do. There was a silence. Mark looked around and saw the women clearly, felt their collective power. This lounge room, like lounge rooms across the country, was where stuff got done. The setting up of the tables, the chair, the booking of the hall, the filling out the forms, the applying for grants, the flowers, the jugs of water, the glasses, the stalls, the baking, the invoices, all the unseen and undervalued work. If a government wanted something done, some message rolled out, some national program, don't call it the academics or the Instagrammers, don't call the CEOs of marketing companies with their private educations and the unfair elevation, no. Call the CWA and put the kettle on. Suitably chastened, Mark thanked the room and raised a hand in farewell. Beth and Georgia stood, murmuring goodbyes. If he was wearing a hat, Mark would have tipped it.
That's that. Right, so stay down. Okay, Vikki.
This is a scene right at the beginning. A shearer hasn't turned up for work, and I hope I'm accurate because I never go to the country, because why would you? Except I'm going to go to beach work, because that sounds lovely. It's got a great alpaca shop. So shearer hasn't turned up for work, and the farmer comes in and he says to Sally, can you ring Brett and find out what's wrong? Okay, so Sally sighed. She had little time for Brett Millard. Unreliable shearers were the worst. When he turned up, Brett could match the other bloke sheep for sheep, but it fell to Sally to chase him when he was a no-show. Sometimes it was Brett's wife, Shayna, who answered the phone. She'd apologise, exasperated, and say, "Sorry, Sal, I'll make sure he's there tomorrow." Good shearer or not, Brett Millard was easily distracted. Shayna was the opposite, worked up at the hospital, backbone of the young family. Problem was, thought Sally as she dialed the number, men like Brett rarely improved with age. Shayna had a tough road ahead of her. The landline at the Millard farm rang for so long, Sally thought it would ring out. Then, just as she was about to replace the receiver, she heard a clunk. It sounded like the phone had been picked up and dropped. "Hello," Sally said. More clunking and finally breathing. "Hello," she repeated, and for a moment she was worried. "Hello?" The voice was really young, probably little Chrissy. "Chrissy, is that you? Is Sally here from your dad's work?" "Sally!" Chrissy sounded excited. What was she now, 3, 4? Sally hadn't seen her in a while. Shayna used to drop Brett off for work and stop in for a cuppa when Chrissy was younger, but hadn't been by since she started working. "Is your mummy or daddy there?" "Yep." More clunking. Sally didn't have kids of her own and made her words slow and clear, like she was talking to someone hard of hearing. "Can you get them for me?" "They're asleep," said the little girl. Sally checked her watch, a little late for a lie-in, especially on a weekday. "Can you go and wake them up?" There was a wail on the other end of the line. "No, they won't wake up." Sally's heart beat a little faster. "Chrissy, where are they?" "Mummy's in bed, but Daddy's silly." "What do you mean, Chrissy? Why is Daddy silly?" "He's sleeping in the kitchen, silly Daddy." "Where in the kitchen?" Sally's voice, suddenly urgent, made her husband look over at her, eyebrows raised. "He's asleep on the floor," said little Chrissy, and laughed like it was funny. And then there was a scratching sound, and the line went dead. Chrissy was gone. Sally turned to her. "There's something wrong at the Millard farm."
That's Vicki's The Unbelieved. Now we're going to hear from Kimberley, who's going to read a few little sections from her novel.
I am. I just wanted to sort of put a bit of a context behind what's happening. So Lucy is my astronomer character, and Lucy's husband is running for Parliament. So at an observatory opening, she describes it's a chance to drink beer, to discuss the damp summer, whether it was time for Beetlejuice to go supernova, and how after the election, no matter who won, Victoria would still be governed by politicians. Then later on that day, Lucy is having an argument with her daughter, the way those of us who have children know, and she's trying to take the dog for a walk. She's just about to be lost, which I think any reader would know because they know that that's the idea of the book. So her dog is called Kepler. Kepler sniffed the crack between the door and its frame, his wet black nose moving along its hinges. Then he looked up at Lucy, head cocked inquisitively. "What's the people puppy doing?" his gesture asked, alone in there. He didn't like Gabby's closed door. So Lucy ends up going for a walk on her own. And this is the walk. The sun reached the crisp heights of noon. There's nothing in the world more peaceful than an elderly Labrador taking its owner for a walk. Kepler stepped along and sniffed, an enthusiastic explorer colonising the street, one letterbox at a time. He twisted once as if to check it was still Lucy's hand attached to his lead, then led her on his exploration of flowers that had recently bloomed and dogs that had freshly sprayed or defecated. He paid particular tribute to a recently erected sign displaying Justin's face, framed with blue political ribbons and a list of promises for an improved town. Yards were very wide and green, mailboxes neat and straight. No indication here that the other side of the Piper Highway was still mostly farms and bushland. Another vote for Justin board stood beside the stop sign at the corner, as if the two signs had paused for a quick chat. Kepler sniffed at it as if recognising the face and lifted his leg to piss. Sharply, Lucy pulled his chain. Kepler's action looked purposeful, a dog claiming ownership. A neighbour might see, and photos on social media were a threat. Someone had already tweeted a photo of Lucy straightening Justin's tie, joking that he couldn't dress himself. Kepler pulled ahead again. The road ended with a gentle widening and another choice of directions for him to make. To one side, the road less travelled. Cicadas sang over farms and bushland as they had long sung over the First Peoples gatherings and briefly over the coal miners. Kepler was attracted to something, no doubt disgusting, off the road, past a dip in the topography that left a gap between the fence and ground. Lucy released him from his lead. He'd come back when called. From past the fence wafted the lanolin manure sheep smell of the land beyond. Bacterial aromas carried on particles of water vapour. They affected Kepler more than her, with her inadequate human sense of smell. Setback Mountain was prominent against a bright sky. Kepler didn't care. He slid under the barbed wire, Lucy following, his lead now limp in her hand. She tossed her trench coat and scarf over the fence first so they wouldn't get caught, and slid underneath before putting them back on. At least in the paddocks she'd meet no more Justin signs. Daylight bleached the sky of stars. But even so, the intrigue remained, infinitely entertaining. Lucy was aware of communication satellites, the International Space Station. There were people out there, orbiting, her colleagues. She crunched on through the grass and twigs after Kepler, thinking of infinitesimally brief lifespans, attempted relationships, the birth of children, the burial of parents. All of it linked to the music of spheres. Omega Centauri, for instance. Kepler was too fast. Lucy broke into a sprint. She was always looking up, even when no stars were visible. This was how one era in her life moved on to the next. If she'd walked just slightly to the north, she would have reached a rotting timber bridge that replaced the trees Indigenous people had dropped for millennia to traverse the creek. Now impassable, she would have been forced to stop. South, and she'd eventually have returned to the fence, the road. But she walked the way she walked. So many momentous changes happened apparently at random. An odd pile of gravel and rocks was in her path. She swerved slightly, and so, looking upwards, Lucy fell. This was it, the crisis, the moment of change in her life, like Orlando watching the clouds of the 19th century drift over St. Paul's while its clock chimed in the new century. Like the world watching a plane flying into a second twin tower, Lucy hadn't known what was coming. The ground swayed like a boxer fainting before he hit her, and then she knew. Those rocks were a malachite. She'd walked over an old mine shaft. The cracking sound was the failure of rotting timbers softened by water to support the weight of her body. The earth yawned open like a mouth, sharp-toothed, and swallowed her whole.
So, three really different books, but also a lot of overlap in them. And I just wanted to talk a bit about Kimberley had an article in The Age today.
Tomorrow.
Oh, was it? Oh, I got it early. Okay, yeah. She put it on Facebook. Just about how your father inspired this. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yep. Look, my father had a lot to do with the process I went through in writing this book. He was a backrooms person in politics in New South Wales as well. But the part of it that was the most important to me was the astronomy part, because he had this small telescope, and we lived in rural New South Wales in Armidale. A lot of people know of it in the New England area. And it's a dark sky country. There, the Milky Way, you understand why it's called the Milky Way. It's a splash of stars across the sky, which is something that we really don't get to see here. And so those childhood memories were really important to me. So my character here, it's her mother who is the astronomer character, but a lot of the early memories of the importance of good parents sharing their passion went into this story, I think.
You can tell that story. And also, you've had your little article in The Age as well. Just if you can tell us a bit about that. That was just fascinated me, because that's just actually happened to me.
Yes. Yeah. Am I sort of telling the things that happened in the...
Yeah.
Oh, so I wrote in the... What I was writing about was how I write about things that have sort of been... that have happened to me in the bush, so instances. So I think the article in The Age, the one you're referring to, is when I wrote about, for example, when I was living in Patchy Wallet during the mouse plague. And I used to have to, my job was, because my dad was the headmaster of a small bush school, so we moved around. So my dad was my teacher from prep to grade 6, and I think 12 was the biggest school I went to, 12 kids. But my job every morning was to empty out the mice and of the buckets from the pantry. So we'd put bottles and grease into the bottles, and then the mice would fall in, and there'd be 50 or 60 mice, some of them still trying to be alive. And it was my job to empty them out. And it was kind of this revulsion. I felt sad for them, I hated them, I felt gross. But you know, those sort of things. But I never hated where I lived. I loved where I lived, and you know, I still do. And then the next thing I think I wrote about was Ash Wednesday, when we were living in Deans Marsh, where the Ash Wednesday actually began in the fires in 1983. And my dad was the headmaster, and the town was surrounded, and we had to, the grade 6s, there was 2 of us, had to withstand their lives. We loved it. Got to rip up the carpet in the school thing and take it out onto the oval and lie underneath it. The preps first, and then the grade 1s, then the grade, and then Dad and my mum, who lived in the house next door with water, then hosing us. And then a man came from Lorne. His colleague had been burnt on the way down. A policeman. His colleague had been burnt on the way to get to us. He'd died, but the man made us. They got there, and he evacuated us all to the hall. And I remember when I was sitting in the foyer, I wasn't afraid. Mainly because I had all these wonderful women around me, these big women, and I had no doubt, I still have no doubt, that they would have run out into the flames for me. You know, I felt so protected. And there was sort of balls going past, and I hated the guts of the girl I was sitting next to. That was my main thing. I was thinking, why am I sitting next to her? And you know, my mum was going, oh, and I was going, oh, this is just so annoying. But I felt completely secure. And now that I live in the northeast and I know about, and we've been there since Black Saturday, I know that with the media that kids don't feel like that anymore. We didn't have social media in Ash Wednesday. Black Friday had been a long time before that. But they're the sort of things I write about. Also because I'm a budding birder, we don't call us twitchers. It's a little bit derogatory. But I walk for a lot in the Mount Chelton National Park, and sometimes we're in the bush just near my home, and you know, outside of my home. And when I'm walking, sometimes about twice, I've seen a man in the bush with binoculars go like this, and I think he's looking at me, but in fact he's looking at, you know, a Rufus Whistler or a Linux Convents or something. And then the third thing is waking up and hearing this barking owl, which is it's described in Birding Australia as a sobbing scream, and my husband's been out in the bush with a torch trying to find this poor woman, and then it stops abruptly and then begins again 5 seconds later, and then we go. And I've heard it since, but it's never lost its chill. So all those things that I write about with landscape and those, and Cutter's End was about hitchhikers, and I've been a hitchhiker many times up and down the Stuart Highway, and I've had some experiences that would now go to court, but they didn't in the early 90s. And all those experiences, I try and make them authentic as possible, country life, and put them in my books. So I hope it works. I hope I answered your question. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I think I've had that experience when someone's
jumped
jumped
the
out.
mice or the birds?
The birds. And it's terrifying.
Oh, it really is.
Really is.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere.
Can I just say that putting the carpet on top of the kiddies and then wetting it, it's like waterboarding for juniors, isn't it?
They were freezing. They hated it.
It's first with bullying.
So all of these women we're describing, they don't sound like they're in peril to me at all, although Vikki, yours are. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit about some of the things that happen in your book. I know Antigone, and she really takes her namesake because she's a very brave woman that puts herself at peril, basically, like in the Theban place. But the other women in the town are under threat. So can you tell us?
Yeah, so I wanted to create a protagonist who was tough. And when I say kind of like Jack Reacher, what I mean by that is I don't mean, yes, you know, we love Jack Reacher. He shoots a lot of people, and, you know, if someone annoys him or they're racist, he just shoots them right in the middle of the forehead. which, you know, we love that. But I didn't want her to be just willy-nilly a shooter. But I wanted to create that kind of female character where she was just strong and she can look after herself. And when she can't, she has a police dog who will just bite people. And so I wanted to create almost an impervious...
What's his name?
Waffles. Because when I wrote my Dog Squad book, at the time just before the book, what the police did is they would go through the alphabet and they would name the dogs after Roman emperors. Come here, Nero. No, well, I don't know any Roman emperors, but didn't one of them fiddle?
Yeah.
Surprise. Anyway, so they gave them these grand names, and I wanted, and they've stopped doing that, but I wanted her to have changed the name to something a little bit playful. And so she has Waffles by her side. And I think also creating Antigone Pollard as the detective was also a bit of a pushback against a lot of books where the female protagonist is battered. You get these stories where they're punched and pummeled, and I've literally read crime fiction where I think she can't still be alive. You can't crunch and crush and bash and burn and I just wanted to not do that to her. It was really important to me that she didn't get hurt. And so I wanted her to be strong, and I wanted her to represent every single woman that I know who's just strong. And so I think even in books where you've got a strong female protagonist, they'll have a headache every second chapter, and it's like she's not going to have a headache. She's not going to have... And it was really important to me to not have any pull on her time. So you get these novels where, Jack Reacher doesn't have pull on his time. He doesn't go, oh my God, there's someone in peril. Oh, the kids need picking up. Wait, he doesn't have to do that. Or he could just shoot and run but he doesn't have kids. So I didn't want her to have this constant pull of looking after parents or looking at, when she interacts with her nana, it's because she loves her nana and she wants to be with her, and it's not any sense of obligation, it's just that she's free to do what every single male character is free to do in just getting on with the job. And that's what I think women do, regardless of what. I've got a daughter, she's old now, she's a bit annoying when she was younger, but I looked after, she didn't die, she's adult and alive. But you just need to, you just want these women that just get on with stuff, and that's what I wanted for her. And so what I wanted is, if you're a Buffy fan, and why wouldn't you be, the final season of Buffy is all about, you have this one strong, this is why we're new best friends. Because
I taught it at La Trobe.
Oh my God, we're best friends now. But the final season of Buffy is all about one strong woman, and instead of fighting the battles and rescuing all the other women, that she shares the power. And so all of the women in peril in the book, my character and other strong women as well, are teaching them to stand up. So it is about that empowering everyone. She teaches self-defence at the local CWA meeting, and so it's not just about her being powerful, it's about saying this power is available to everyone. So in that way, they're all fighting back. So it's the law doesn't work and it doesn't protect women, but we've still got a knee to the groin up our sleeve. That sounds a bit yoga-ish, doesn't it? I know, right? It's a mental image of twisting. But we can all fight back. It's like people say to me, "Hey, do you want me to walk you to your car?" And I go, "No, I'm fueled by middle-aged woman rage."
That comes out from the first thing. Whereas Kimberley, your
My
one character has a headache.
Yeah, she
Well, on the
does.
other hand, she has a headache because she's surviving drinking water laced with arsenic.
Yes.
So I think she's entitled.
That's okay.
And I love Lucy too. She does have to worry about her family because that's part of the crux of the book.
Well, her daughter is 11 years old, and her daughter is really the only one who cares that she's gone missing. And that's.
And I love her daughter. Gabby's such a
Yeah. I'm a high school teacher, and Gabby is like different bits and pieces of some of my favourite students.
Yeah, she's just gorgeous, and she learns a dictionary basically. She's one of these weird little. I just love her actually.
Thank you.
But she's a beautiful character. Okay, and you know, really, what does come through this is male privilege throughout all of the books. Actually, Lucy's husband is running for Parliament, and he just thinks he can do whatever he wants, and she's there to clean up. And the same with all of these. And so even though we've got really strong women, there's a lot of women out there, like we've got a creepy stalker, we've got a rapist, and we've got...
A politician.
Yeah. Very good. So, but that sort of comes through in each of the themes. I just want to ask each of you, because I love some of your spin-off characters too. So, would you ever think of writing a book with a spin-off, with one of your spin-off characters?
I got a lot of emails and letters about the character of Jagdeep, who I wrote for in The Cutter's End. And I love Jagdeep. And Jagdeep, when I first started work as a lecturer at La Trobe, my boss was a woman named Jagdeep Kaur, and I loved her because she was so tough and she told me exactly what to do. She was friendly but not overly friendly. She was a great boss because she said, this is what you do, bang, 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 bang. And I knew what I had to do, and I really liked her. And then she left and moved to Melbourne, and I wrote Cutter's End, and I put Jagdeep in some of her. I didn't know her very well, but I liked those strong characteristics as a boss and as a woman. And then I panicked after the first draft. This is before I got it published or anything. And I wrote to her and I said, Jagdeep, I've used your name in my book, and it's not you, but it's some of your characteristics that I really like. Is that okay? And she wrote back and goes, yeah, that's great, and I'm thinking of becoming a cop. It was been great, but I would never write a book from Jagdeep's point of view. I never would. I don't know enough about Sikh culture. I don't know any Sikh people well. I only knew Jagdeep, and I wrote her without any thoughts of like cultural appropriation or anything. I just wrote it because I liked the person, I liked the characteristics. But I don't know whether I'd go there. Penguin, my publishers, sort of talked to me a bit about that. They said, do you want to write from Jagdeep's point of view? And then I said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And they said, good call. And my editor is a wonderful Australian Asian woman who is my chief editor. And she sort of looks at the thing and makes sure that it's okay and all that sort of stuff. So, and she's fabulous. I love her pieces, Kalhari, and she's so clever. But I don't think I'd go there, to be honest. Other characters I would, but I'd be a little bit frightened, I think, of doing that, as much as I love Jagdeep.
Kimberley, yours probably can't so much, can they?
No.
Although I'd love to see Lucy in something.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it
I'm
until
sorry,
now.
Gabby.
Oh, Gabby.
Yeah, Gabby.
Yeah.
She's got such a beautiful voice in the book.
She does. She does.
She's a strange little child.
She is.
Yeah.
Gabby's the child character, and I would feel bad putting her in peril again, but maybe one day. She's very tenacious.
Yeah.
I think, you know, she's one of those characters that's such a joy to write. But, you know, maybe one day I'll think of something terrible that I can do to her.
Or do it to a kid in one of the classes she's in, and she's the one that solves it.
Yeah.
But Vikki, what about you? Is waffles going to figure?
I don't think I could write, although when I went out to the dog squad, Penguin had asked me to do the book on the dog squad, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. And then I'm, going, I don't know how to do that. Because how do you give a voice to a dog? And the minute I went out to the dog squad, the dogs had every handler, and there's big, tough, mostly blokes, and it's like, do you have favourite dogs? No, they're working dogs, and we treat them all the same. And then they get this little glint in their eye, and they're like, but you know, Nero, he was a champion. And then they go on to talk about Nero, like he loves them more than his, everyone. So, so no, not from Waffles. Wazza? No, because I think he makes a good sidekick, but I think he's maybe follows Antigone's lead, and I think I need to write, and don't get me wrong, I've written books on really interesting men, but for me it's a time in my career to write for women and from a woman's point of view, because I think men won't write women much, and if they do, we get, I looked in the mirror and I made my own breasts. It's like, yeah, no one does that. And so I don't, except for Carmel. But me sometimes. And Kim. So we get a little hornet's nest here. So I think that if women write men and men write men, or women that booby stare, we've got for me it's super important to have strong female characters that can change things and can change minds. So I think I would stick with the cast of characters as they are, but there's a sequel on the way, so spoiler alert.
Terrific. One of the things I did, there were some quite difficult scenes in all of the books actually, and I just wanted to see how you got yourself into the headspace to be able to write that, particularly Lucy down the mine shaft, and it's actually beautiful writing. It's just stunning, looking up at the stars and just thinking she's going to die. Yeah.
Well, I spent a long time writing it.
Yeah.
But also I went driving around rural Victoria looking at mine shafts and just thinking about what part of the sky was visible through a gap in the ground. And what's actually interesting is just this past month I've got one of those star things that you project to your bedroom ceiling, and it makes the stars as they are actually go around on your ceiling at night time. And when I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful. I bought it for myself. It was my present when my book was finally, ready and coming out and everything. I forgot what the word is. What's the word? It's a planetarium. It's sort of like a planetarium. One of those complicated words. And anyway, so I could put it on for an hour and watch the stars going around on my ceiling as I'm going to sleep. And I think even though by the time I got it, Lucy was written, I sort of imaginatively inhabited a space like that when I was writing her world, because she is an astronomer and she's stuck there, and that is what changes for her while she is stuck in the mine shaft, and she's there for a period of days. So she does get to see the stars and to really feel more part of the world than she ever was just as an observer with scientific equipment, because she has to experience it more for herself. So I think almost in a way it was a thought experiment, really, like just spending a lot of time thinking what it would be like for her.
And then she has to make a decision whether to drink poisoned water.
Well, she knows that one of the gold mining, the arsenic is involved. It's not part of the gold mining process, but arsenic is also a heavy metal. So when gold is mined, arsenic is also disturbed, and she knows that. So she knows that she's dying of thirst, and that's a very critical choice for her, whether to die of thirst or whether to drink the water that she knows is poisoned. So I did things like talk to chemists about what the process of slow poisoning by arsenic would be like, and if she might start to hallucinate, and and how that would go. So talking to people and just imagining it.
Yeah. So it worked well. And Vikki, your book, there's some nasty sexual assaults going on. So if you could just tell us a bit about that.
I purposely in the book kept most of that off camera, And I think it's really important for me never, and as a true crime author, never to gratuitously portray sexual assault. And so there was, so I kind of keep it really vague, and I'm really conscious of that, what we call violence porn. So that sometimes you read a book and it's so violent toward women, and you just think, I've got a strong stomach for this because of the work that I do, but it's like, why? And I think I don't like it because I've seen real violence and I've seen real crime scene photos, and I know what this is like for real, and I just don't think it should be glorified, and I don't think it should be graphically front of centre. And so most of that kind of action and the sexual assaults are reported, and they might be talked about by the victims in vague terms, but apart from sort of when they're finally, the sort of final scene, I wanted to have a real glimpse. And I do that in true crime too. I have a real glimpse of the actual violence, and the rest of it, I do it as a true crime author through post-mortem. So I think people need to know what happened to the victims. That's really important, because if they don't know, they will imagine worse. And I think when you reconstruct that violence through the post-mortem examination, and you've got a pathologist saying there's a 10 centimetre cut near the collarbone or whatever, and so you go, okay, they're the exact injuries, but it's not, it's not the horror movie stuff. So it's very carefully done.
Yeah. And yet you still managed to capture the victim, the impact that it's had on her and her family. We're just running out of time. I just wanted to speak to you about research, because it seems like all of your books had so much in them. Like obviously, can you tell us a bit about yours, Kimberley?
Well, this is a line that is out of the article that you read that's out tomorrow. I was just, I always wanted to pretend to be an astronomer, and that's the thing with Seinfeld. That's Seinfeld where George says, I always wanted to pretend to be a marine biologist. I think he says, I love that aspect. I think the funnest part of being an author is taking a character who has another life that I could have had, and researching it and stepping into that skin for a while. It's just, it's one of the great joys, and there are all sorts of things I would have liked to have done with my life if I hadn't at 8 decided that I was going to be a writer, but at least having made that decision, I can sort of step in and out of these roles. So I really enjoy the research, so that's the main thing, I guess.
Well, for someone who's not particularly interested in planets, it was great for me too. And all of them, because I love it when I find something in a novel that I didn't know, something like The Poisonous Trees.
Oh, yeah.
If you could tell us a bit about that, because you obviously did a lot of research on birds and plant life. And
I actually didn't really do a lot of. I feel kind of semi-guilty about doing that, saying that, but a lot of. So I write the first draft and the second draft, and then a lot. So I ring up my brother-in-law, who's a mechanic, and say, what's the best way to, blow up a car, or how do I, and he would tell me how the best, and then I ring up my dad and say, what's the best, from how many metres away could I shoot a human without blood, or a deer, what sort of gun do you use best for a deer or for wild animals or something, and then I'm surrounded by people who have got 22s or 12 gauges or even Lee Enfield 303s, in the back of their porch, this is, the government amnesty buyback didn't get them all, believe you me, in country towns. There's one under every porch. When we went around Australia, my dad had one hidden in the a 22 in the side thing in case someone pulled us up. I don't know why I think we would do that, but he would threaten to shoot us if we didn't be quiet. So it's talking to a lot of people. The blackwood, the acacia wattle is poisonous, and but it's not, and it can make people cough. You would all have known you would all know, you probably have walked past them all, and maybe you start coughing in the bush and you don't know, but it's probably because of the blackwood, the acacia wattle, which is, so I sort of knew those things, and the most of the things that I don't know, because I'm not a very knowledgeable person, I'm lucky that I've got friends and people who I can draw on. And you know, we're teachers. Schools are a great place to go in and say, how, you know, I ring up my mum and say, how's the best way to make what's a CWA scone recipe, or what's a, you know, all that sort of thing. So I guess there is research. Of course there's research, but I've got a friend that's a policeman, and so I grill people I know. I'm like a cannibal. They probably hate my guts, my friends. Every time they get a phone call from me, they go, ugh. But
I love it.
well, I hope they do. I don't know. Well, I love them for it. But yeah, that's it probably.
Okay, and Vikki, you obviously in this novel have drawn on a lot of your true crime research.
Yeah, those poisonous trees, that's why I don't go to the country. And my recognition, what's that? A tree. What's that? A bird. Until you said that they were different, I thought they were the same. I think having spent 30 years in interviewing victims, police dogs, very tight-lipped those canines, but I certainly hung out with a lot of people, and I steal liberally from everything that you say to me. It's going to end up in a book. And so, sorry, Sandra.
Sandra's ended up in the book.
Totally. You might see some resemblances, and it's not just like Sandra. So I don't really have to, like, I just picture people in my mind, and I think there was a lot of, I think women, you get to your 50s and you start, you know, equality, yes, equal pay, and then you start to go, yeah, that's bullshit. You start, you know, you might go for a promotion at work, and, you know, a guy gets it, and all of a sudden...
The PE teacher always gets it.
It's because they can do all the necessary
conspiracy. I don't know what these very limber men are doing in the interview room. But whatever it is, they're getting the job. I'm totally putting their money forward.
No, it's PE. 5 years and their principal.
Yeah. My school principal's a PE. It's been recorded.
They're all...
Yes.
Anywho, and you see this happening, and then, because I'm not outspoken in a yucky way, I'm outspoken in a gorgeous way. It's quite triggering for some men. And I don't know why. You know, I had a person, a non-female person, you know, say to me, you know, we had a question at school about, well, what do you have to do to get a building or a prize named after you? And I said, well, you know, you need your man parts. And he's going, oh, what do you mean? And I went, oh, I'm sorry, were there some buildings and prizes named after women when I blinked? There weren't. And it's like, you know, that this blindness, and you start to rage against this just, it's unfair. And I think we just want justice. And so that's really, I think, what this novel speaks to, is women, you know, I've got male characters saying stuff that I have heard men say to me and other women, and I think every woman is going to read that and go, oh God, I know that guy. Oh my God, he works at my work. And there's going to be this instant recognition because it's subtle. It's things like you go to shake, you know, Antigone's got a male partner, so when they go and interview someone, she'll say, you know, I'm Detective Pollard and this is Detective Harvey, and they'll shake his hand and talk to him. I've had that. My husband and I went interviewing once, and, you know, it was a long drive, and he drove and he came in, and the detective that I was interviewing talked exclusively to my husband. It's like, hello, over here. And I just let him talk because that was the point. But every woman has these subtle things, and I think that's why this novel, people are going, oh, yes.
That's great. I just wanted to go back to one of the themes in the novel, which I think is land and ownership and our relationship to it. Kimberley, yours in particular, you said when she's down the mine shaft, she feels like she's going into that land. but also her husband is part of basically the squattocracy. So if you can tell us a bit about that.
Well, I'm trying to think of how to do this without too many spoilers. So Justin is from old land-owning area and an old land-owning family, and is quite outraged at the fact that he doesn't own as much of the land as his family used to, and completely fails to see the irony in this. He feels like the land has been stolen from him, and is one of those people who will never understand the irony, and hopefully it's there. Lucy understands. Like Lucy sees what's going on, and like I'm not spelling it out. Like I don't know. I'm not trying to make a huge political point about it or anything, but it is a novel that is set in the Australia that we live in today, where we do have a huge unresolved problem about what we are doing and have done to the land, and there are questions that it raises, and the characters in my novel suffer the consequences, I think, of that neglect in direct ways. Sorry, that was a bit wishy-washy, but I really don't want to give away the ending.
Don't. No, because I haven't got to the ending yet.
Okay. And also land features in your novel too.
Yes,
Margaret.
yeah. I mean, it's really interesting where I'm from at the moment in Beechworth, or on the edge of Beechworth, not quite in town. The tensions between with land prices and house prices. Everything is about land prices. And in a town very close to me just recently, they got a new assistant principal at the school, and the assistant principal and his family couldn't afford a house. Because there was 40%, 50% I think it was, now rented out as Airbnbs. So there's a real tension in the country at the moment with that, and that's certainly nothing against city people, or I don't like that whole city brought up, but there certainly is problems at the moment with land prices and house prices and local people being unable to live in their own area. So that tension is always there, and I know that very well. And my family are farming families, so I know about the selling of land and the big money. People come in with very big money offering solar, which sounds wonderful. It does. It sounds wonderful, and to city people and to people who perhaps don't know so much about the country, a solar farm, what's not to like? Well, what's not to like is it's really good farming land, and we're going to need food. Like we need good land for food and for grazing, as well, of course, as renewables. But all this stuff is playing into, do you take the big money for this corporations, do you, that sort of stuff. So I hope I sometimes I get a bit worried about how country life is portrayed in books, and country people are portrayed in books, because really country towns are microcosms of cities. We have lawyers, we have doctors, we have in one point once someone said to me, I said, I was really sick, so and she was a doctor, and she said, I'm really sick, and someone said, you're a doctor? And we were like, yes, people get sick in the country, and we do have doctors. So it's I hope I've portrayed the land and city stuff as authentically as I can. Yeah.
Although unfortunately some towns can't get their doctors.
Well, that's another thing. We can't get doctors. Yeah, and some towns have, like Castlemaine is overloaded with doctors. Although Castlemaine, we like to call it hedge your bets. But we love Castlemaine. Yeah.
We can't even get into our doctors here. So, and Vikki, yours is set in the country. Do you think you could have set this in the city? Or was there a reason? Let's do the city country
Look, I think even though I don't really go to the country very often, although Dansford has good scones, I've got to say. And I think there's a lake and ducks. Well, they could just be birds. I don't know. I've got like bird insecurity now. But
You did it very well.
I think they're ducks. But I think what being in the country does is it limits. It's like an Agatha Christie, where they're locked in on the mountain and snowbound, and then you can limit your suspects, and you can limit and everybody knows everybody. Although I haven't really been to the country to go, but if I am in Daylesford having a scone, I eavesdrop. And I eavesdrop and I think, oh, she looks like she'd be in the CWA, and I just kind of lean forward and eat my scone. That's probably a CWA recipe. But I think what it does is it feels more intimate and it feels more... Did I do it well? Like, were you convinced that I had actually been to the country? Oh, thank you.
I love the
I
book.
faked that really well.
Yeah. I loved it. The paddocks and Man's old place and the press tin was beautiful.
I don't know what a
Well,
paddock
that's the
is.
thing too, and all of them, because they're small towns,
Yeah.
like Justin in your book.
Yeah.
If he does anything wrong, it's just out there
It's
for
brilliant.
everyone.
You did it so well.
Well,
Yeah.
I live in the city now,
Yeah.
but I grew up in a small town, so and I like to go to the country sometimes. I like to come home afterwards. But no, I grew up in small town Australia, and
Oh, you both, it was beautiful. I hope, now I sound like I'm being one of those people, but I don't mean
I feel like going to an Airbnb and beach work, but now I just think I'm making an assistant principal homeless, so I feel bad.
don't worry, as a sports teacher, you can go camping.
Oh, yeah.
You'll be promoted really quickly depends on you get a house.
Go camping. Fun the week for family.
Okay, we're running out of time now, but I just wanted to just ask all of you how your book changed from when you first started writing it. Has it changed much, or your themes changed, your characters?
I can, I'm one of those, I'm a really painstaking writer, and my book at the end looks almost nothing like it looked at the start. So I draft and I print it out and I cross bits out and I rewrite it. And Lindy's sitting there, we were away on a writer's retreat a couple of weeks ago, and she's seen how it works, and it's painful. So it is, it's like, but that's, I don't know, like in the beginning I didn't like that, and I used to think I can get faster at this, I can have a really detailed plan. And now I have a detailed plan, and I still get to the end of the draft and change everything. So, yeah, lots of differences. That's my process. I'm happy with it now.
Vikki?
I'm a really efficient writer because up until this year, I've worked full time for 31 years, and alongside that, I'm making podcasts, I'm writing books, and doing a PhD, and so I have to be efficient. And so when I write, my first drafts are really, really, really close to what the final draft will be. And how I write, I don't know how other people do it, but I write the first chapter, and then the next day I'll open it up, or a week later, and read through it and fix it and tweak it, and then I do the next chapter, and then I read through the first and the second. And so every time you look at it, it gets refined, and it's word perfect. And when I entered it into the Alan Unwin, I would be surprised if there was a typo in there. It was perfect. So just doing it that way seemed to work. They're very efficient.
Yeah, I do that too, because I work as well, and I'm not as busy, but I do that as well. I sit down and I write, but my contract with Penguin is 3 books in 3 years, so my third one in this is due on December the 23rd, and I've only written about 14,000 words, so I've got to get cracking on that. But I'm the same. I can knuckle down. I can knuckle down, and really, when someone cracks it with a deadline, I can do it. But it's funny with Cutter's End down with Stonetown, I found out who the killer was in both at about 72,000 words. So I'm really interested to see if that happens with the third one. It was weird.
And did you know who the murderer or the rapists were?
Yeah, did you?
At the beginning?
Yes.
All right, we're pretty much out of time now, but I just wanted to ask you, when the films are made of your books, and it seems to be happening a lot, who do you want playing the main characters?
I used to say for mine Vince Colosimo, but I don't think so.
He could play the guy in jail. Stop begging.
I used to get really excited about that, and the right. Some people have got the rights to, but yeah, I don't know. I don't sort of dare dream that far quite yet. Maybe I don't. Do you?
We were talking at dinner that my male detective was based on Peter Hallier. I just had him in my head when I was writing the book. But my female character, who's the girl that we get, Carmel, the Sisters in Crime, like the David Awards, and she was on Wentworth with the brown auburn hair.
Oh, she's Catherine Clements.
No.
No.
You mean Danny, the one who played B. Smith? Danny.
I never watched Wentworth, but I knew she was on it.
Or the young one?
The young one. Who's the?
Yes.
That one.
There.
Anyway, I should Google her name, but she would be perfect. So just that sort of short dark hair and just the real kick-ass kind of.
I know her name. Keep talking.
Yeah, she's been at Sisters in Crime events and she would be perfect.
Great.
Or Reese Witherspoon.
I cannot imagine Bruce Witherspoon.
Daniel De Silva.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, Daniel De Silva.
She'd be
Daniel.
perfect.
Nicole De Silva.
Nicole De Silva.
Nicole.
Yeah.
She's Frankie in Sisters.
Yeah, that's what
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah.
She'd be so good.
Yeah.
I had no idea who I'd like to be in it, but I wanted Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on the soundtrack.
Oh.
You do.
That would be beautiful.
Well, we know what that stood for.
No, I don't.
LSD.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I do.
Alrighty, well, thank you all. I really recommend all these books. They're all fabulous. They really are very different, and I loved The Map of the Night. It's very literary and it has some beautiful allusions, and some of the description is beautiful. Vicky's, I could feel that anger. Just seething underneath. It's just.
You're welcome.
And it's terrific. It's a really fabulous read. And also Margaret, it's got. I love the CWA. We were talking about this at lunch because my mother-in-law was president of CWA. These women are amazing. They just do everything. And she's in her 80s, and she says she's going down to the old folks' home to help out. I just think it's amazing. And you have a real fabulous ending of this book. It's just not what you're going to expect. So, yeah, thank you all, and thanks for everyone.
Thank you.